Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest, someone that was genuinely an inspiration for me growing up. I used to watch his videos all the time on YouTube. Today we have the legend himself, Chris Howe. Chris Howe is a videographer, YouTuber, and also an entrepreneur with tons of different ventures and stuff going on all the time. If you want to learn about the use of social media in business, if you want to learn about videography, photography, if you want to learn about YouTube, then this is the podcast for you. My name is Harrison Brown, and this is the Instamind Podcast. If you're watching or listening, I hope this helps. Listen, thank you so much for coming on firstly. I know you're a busy guy with a busy schedule, and you've also just been to Yemen, so thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, no worries, man. This year's travel schedule has been a bit more hectic than normal. Kind of at a point where I want to rest, but I still got a couple big trips coming up. And also in this career, you can literally get invited to like Brazil tomorrow and it'll be like, are you available next week? So sometimes you got to say yes. And then other times it's about finding the work-life balance, which I feel like I've found a good balance in my life where it's 2 weeks of travel and then 2 weeks at home, but I'm leaning a little bit more towards being at home these days.
Yeah. I think what I've found as well is the older that I've got, the more that travel just becomes really painful. Like sitting on a flight for 12 hours and then you've got 3 hours of a cancellation or like delay. You're lugging a huge bag on your back with all your camera equipment. What is your kind of go-to for camera equipment when you're traveling?
Yeah, I've been trying to dial that in a lot over the last little while, especially with the amount of travel that I'm doing because, to hit on the point that you just made, your back gets really, really sore. And I think there's always this compromise between image quality and enjoying the trip and then getting content that can stand the test of time. So I think a perfect example of this is I just released a YouTube video where I was talking about the new DJI Pocket 3. And basically it's just a really super small camera. It's got 10-bit, super high quality. And I wanted to test it out just so I could see if I could vlog with that camera and make content with that camera and basically just carry like a little day bag with me where at the end of the day, my body doesn't hurt, but I still got stuff that I would be confident to post on social media. And then that's the complex part about, my positioning of my job of positioning myself as a professional. So sometimes, you got to let your ego down and be like, I'm not bringing the 70-200 and the 35 mil and the 85 mil and this camera. I think it's gotten really intense. But to answer your question at the beginning of this is I'm really paring my kit down right now. And even so much so that I'm traveling with the Lumix S5 Mark II and using the kit lens, the 20-60, because I don't want to travel with all the other stuff. And so unless I need to bring big drones, I'm picking lightweight and best bang for your buck image quality. And I don't mind sacrificing it because I think, as you get older, we start to learn that the story is more important.
Oh, for sure. And some of the most successful videos that I'm sure you'll have the same kind of issue as me. Like some of the most successful videos I've done have been off the cuff on a GoPro or on something that's good, but it's not great. And that they seem to be the ones because there's more thought into the storytelling aspect of it. Is that kind of where you started the career, was as more of a storyteller than a videographer, do you think?
I think that's the natural progression potentially for a lot of people. I mean, maybe I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but in my case, when you're not as skilled technically, I think you lean more on the creativity at the beginning, and then you kind of gaslight yourself up into thinking that you need better image quality to get views or get more exposure or advance your careers, which is not entirely wrong. I think image quality and gear has a time and place, but then at some point you start to crutch on that too much, or you spend all your time focusing on that when really we start to lose sight of the fact that humans are watching the end goal. Yeah. And there's also trends that go. I think we're in a trend right now that image quality is coming back into popularity. I think the last 3 or 4 years, people really wanted content that seemed more authentic and shot on a phone. Mm-hmm. And that could also just be the nature of different people's accessibility to content. So when you have TikTok and then we're getting exposed to new content creators, all they have are iPhones. So then all of a sudden you're like, well, maybe is this what everybody wants? So Marshall McLuhan said is the medium is the message. I think the medium plays such a massive impact on audiences' digestibility of content too. But anyways, this is a long way to say I think image quality is getting more popular. And I think for everybody who had focused on that for a long time, I think we're going to see like the next 2 or 3 years where people are going to want to see really pretty things again.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. I think that when I see ads on TikTok or Instagram, I know almost instantly if it's an ad, if it's 4K recorded in a cinematic style. So you're more likely to click off of them. Whereas when it is like a mobile phone and somebody's just recording themselves speaking, Whoop do it really, really well. Their marketing's amazing because it's literally just somebody with their selfie camera on recording a little message. And sometimes you're more likely to stop on those ones because they're not as professional.
Yep. I think the whole mentality, I was chatting about this with my friend Patrick Tommaso, is that you let people's guards down by having like maybe the beginning of your video be something very relatable or accessible, shot on a phone, and then it can go into higher quality. So it's almost like letting people's guard down to then enter with the final message that could be, and this is a longer answer too, is that because social media has become this place for advertisements now, people have their guards up all the time. And so they're always feeling like they're being sold to, even if they're not being sold to, which is also another, interesting and potentially dangerous place for a lot of content creators these days, because who knows if people are starting to get, sick of constantly being sold to.
Yeah. Yeah. And interesting that you've mentioned that, because when I posted a video the other day, I actually did the same video twice. I did one that was just a really nice time lapse of the Northern Lights. And then I did a secondary one that was a selfie video of the camera frozen, really not great quality because it was just it was dark. It was on a camera, It was on a phone. And then it cut into the Northern Lights. And the one that wasn't as good at the start got, 100, 200,000 views, whereas the other one got about 10. So it's like a really weird, it is just letting people's guard down, isn't it?
Yeah. Or even a sense of relatability where people are interested in the behind the scenes. So there's a curiosity aspect to it. And then there's an element of it's not showing off. Like, it's not like, look how great my life is. Look how great you're kind of giving everybody a glimpse and being like, oh, actually, that looks like it would be really hard to do. And also, here's a human behind all of this. So I think there's the psychology of social media and presentation of content is always like a really interesting discussion.
Yeah, yeah. I have to ask, I remember seeing one of your videos and I was probably, I think I was 17 at the time. And it was the
and now
Instagram.
You're 42.
20, we're getting there. 26, we're getting there. But I remember seeing, it was like your Instagram, it was how to beat the Instagram algorithm. It was something like that. And it was quite, it was really good. I was wondering, how did you begin the process of like speaking in front of a camera? Because for all intents and purposes, it's quite a strange thing to do.
Yeah. And I think for me, it took me a long time to understand what I think is a very useful piece of information for anybody that's listening, is that when you start to talk to a camera, I think people think about talking to large audiences where it's just, you have to remember that you're talking to a single person at the opposite end of that camera. Most people's viewing experiences are max 2 people in a room these days, maybe a few more. But the reality is people are watching on their phones and they're also just, and that's a very individualistic experience. So once you start talking to a camera as if it is just a person that you're talking to, whether it's a stranger and or a friend, I think it's better to treat the camera like it's your friend and or like a diary entry. And I think that goes a lot further for creating a level of comfort while you're talking in the camera. I feel like I should make a YouTube video on this now. Now that you've said that, I feel like that. But I think anything is always very awkward at the beginning, and as difficult as it is to hear this and as common as it is to hear this, it really is just doing the reps. You got to practice that skill set like any other skill set. If you want to get better at writing, you have to write every day. If you want to get better at talking to a camera, you literally just got to start by talking to a mirror, then maybe talk to your phone, and then talk to a bigger camera. And not to say that any of those are better or worse. I think it's just important to realize that it is a skill. And like any other skill, if you think about it like that, and I will progress by doing more of it, that's how it gets easier.
Yeah, I suppose it's just like going to the gym. You're not going to build your biceps to the point of being like Chris Hemsworth in a day, right?
Yeah, you
need
can't
to
watch a YouTube tutorial about how to get a bigger bicep and then get a bigger bicep without actually doing the work, right? So,
Yeah.
that is just the hard truth of that skill. But I think there are frame mindset shifts that make it easier when you are doing it. And I think another part of the process for me is knowing that I get a better scope on how I talk and present myself when I talk to a camera. So, people usually freeze up because it represents their ego. They feel like they don't have anything meaningful to say. There's a lot. They feel like they're being hyper analyzed when they're watching a video, but you are hyper analyzing yourself the most. So there's a lot that you can learn about yourself by filming yourself. And then two, it's a good reminder that most people don't care as much as you might care at the end of the day about how either you look or how you're coming across. And I think it really helps to dissolve your ego by talking to a camera, even though it starts from a place of ego. Ironic, isn't it?
We come full circle.
Yeah.
It's a strange one though. I think that, especially from doing the podcast, the people that seem to be most nervous talking in front of the camera are sometimes the highest status. For example, CEOs or managing directors or business people that are highly credible seem to be the most nervous when talking to a camera. And I wonder if it does go back to that kind of ego thing, or that they're just afraid maybe to say something wrong, or they think they don't have as much to offer.
Yeah, and there could be a lot at stake in those situations too. So, depending on what you say in a video could make or break. It could advance your company. It could take it a step back. And I know it's an interesting example to bring up because I find it interesting that Elon doesn't care. Like anything he says could just drop his stock like crazy or advance it by so much. And I think that's a really interesting place for him to be in, where he is just confident who he is as a person on camera, and he's embracing his troll-like qualities, because I think that in his mind that creates a level of like trust for those people.
Yeah.
But I think it also scares a lot of people off, and people go, I hate this. And so, it's an interesting topic, and it's coming up in my life right now, which is a lot about like people pleasing. And probably a lot of CEOs just understand the risk that's associated with speaking to a camera and the fear that could come from people tearing it apart. But I think anything where you're a public figure has high risk and high reward. So at the same time, you could say something that destroys your career, or you could have the most incredible life because you put yourself on camera. And I think that's up to you to decide if that's worth taking the risk or not.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that people, especially nowadays with like TikTok, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, and all that kind of stuff, they have an ADHD mindset where you might be news for a week, but I promise you that people will have forgotten you very, very quickly.
Yeah.
It's such a strange trend. Like there's stuff that goes totally viral on the news, and within 2 days, nobody knows about it. Nobody cares. It drops off so quickly. So I think that there's a good gentleman that did that authenticity piece called Nico Lenard. Do you know him?
No, I'm not familiar.
He's a watch guy on YouTube. I think he's got 1.6 million subscribers.
Oh, Nico. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, keep going. Yeah. I don't know what he said. Go ahead.
So the watch industry is a very quiet place, and it's very much don't speak out against your turn. Be very careful with what you say. However, Nico just came out and just ripped everyone, and he got so big because of the authenticity aspect.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for people.
I think also people respect trailblazers and respect people that are willing to risk it all in order to communicate the truth. Ricky Gervais, I think, had like an Oscar speech one time, and he just tore the industry apart at one point. He was basically like, I'm never going to get invited back to it. But at the same time, I think there's a really large group of people that have massive respect for him because he said things that people were really afraid to say. And so despite your peers and other people that are, saving face or trying to, play the game and be nice, which there's a time and a place for, obviously. But I think there's using social media and using a camera, using distribution as a means for positive cultural change is a really, really important thing. And I think one of my favorite parts about the industry these days is that we're getting exposed to niches and voices that we've never, ever had the exposure to in our entire lives. And hearing the opposite side of the story, because there's always, we don't have to get political or anything like that, but there's always 2 points of view to every single story. And I think we consistently get bombarded with like a Western perspective on things. And then, maybe now we get to see what the opposite side looks like because nobody's controlling that media as much. I know there's always complex things and blah, blah, blah. The government's controlling things. But at the end of the day, it's amazing. We can see a video coming out of Africa that we would have never seen before, or coming out of the Philippines that we may never seen. I think that's a really cool place to be in, because growing up, I'm sure, at least in my case, I was only ever exposed to like Canadian and American content and maybe the odd piece of German content because my grandmother listened to German radio. And now I can be exposed to like a global spectrum of content. And that's a change in time and space and technology because of that.
Yeah. And I think, again, going back to Elon, that's the amazing thing. I suppose it's not called Twitter now, but about X, is that he does not, freedom of speech is freedom of speech to him. He's like, you can literally say it within reason. You don't want to, be someone in jail or something like that, but you can within reason say whatever you want. But I think where it gets scary is where people can properly tailor the content to manipulate the masses. Like, I know in China, on TikTok, they are only allowed to listen or watch educational content, and the algorithm rewards them on educational content. Whereas in the UK, we're all dancing around like idiots, which is it's kind of scary because it's being so tailored and manipulated. And I think that people can also get themselves into positions of being in kind of like a mirrored room where your algorithm tailors to your point of view, so you won't hear anyone else's point of view. Yeah. It's like flat earthers, right?
Yeah, and it could reinforce your own mindsets on stuff too. This is, I mean, we don't have to go too far down this, but I think the interesting thing is that in a weird way, there's all this stuff going on behind the scenes that basically is defining, like, here's the avatar of Chris Howe and his interests based on like data points. So we'll group him into a bunch of people that, more or less have the same interests, and the same for you, Harrison, whatever your interest might be. Maybe some of our stuff overlaps because we like watches and cars and things like that, and nature. But, at the end of the day, not in like a bad way, but I don't think we're as like special as we think we are. And I think ultimately, we are being fed into an echo chamber of our interests, but at the same time, maybe we're also enjoying those more. Maybe our ads are better targeted to our interests rather than just seeing things that don't land versus things that actually resonate. So the argument can be made for, well, is that better because our general experience is better and we get to enjoy the app and or content or learn more about things that are probably of interest based on the avatar that is Chris Howe? Or is it bad that we're not getting exposed to new ideas and new concepts? Or is it up to us to push the mind of curiosity, and maybe we don't need to just randomly stumble across stuff, but maybe that is up to us to go to the library or have conversations with people that were not even in our groups, to start having conversations that would expose us to new ideas. So I don't know, we can jam on this stuff all the time. I don't think it's good or bad. I just think it's an interesting place to see both sides of that coin.
Yeah, and there's definitely two sides. I mean, we wouldn't be talking were it not for social media, Yeah. And there's so many of my friends, good friends, close friends that I've met through social media because of the shared interest. So there's definitely two sides of it. I think.
Oh, my quality of life is significantly better because I'm put my life online.
Yeah.
And I know that because some of my closest friends are people that work in the industry, and I have a global community, and I can 100% confidently, like, my life is better because I've built a career online from social media, and not because of the opportunities that have come from it, but literally from the communities of people I've been introduced to.
Yeah, for sure. And they would have pushed your career further. They would have given you more opportunities. I know that
Yeah.
you've obviously your good friend Peter McKinnon. He's
Yep.
awesome, big watch guy as well.
Yeah.
How did you guys meet? This podcast is brought to you by Raymond Vale. If you are looking for your next luxury Swiss watch, then look no further than Raymond Vale. I've always had an obsession with watches. I have a ton in my collection, and Raymond Vale have been at the forefront of my mind for quite a while, especially with the new Millisime that they released. And also, it just won the new GPHG award for Best Watch of the Year. Essentially, it's like the Oscars for watches, and that watch won it. It's a seriously dressy, sexy, simplistic model. So definitely check them out on their website. That is Raymond Vale Watches if you're looking for your next luxury watch. And with that said, back to the podcast.
We met because we shot weddings back in the day. So this is like one of those things that we actually met not because of the internet, but our friendship got rekindled again because of the internet. So we had been friends because we were both from Newmarket, Ontario. We had shot. We were both kind of shooting weddings. Peter was much more advanced in his career at that time, so he was kind of like the go-to photographer, and I was just starting. And the woman that hired me to shoot her wedding also hired Peter to shoot her wedding on the photo side. And I remember I was rocked up with all this like homemade gear, and Peter thought it was like the funniest thing ever and was taking photos on his phone. And then he showed me those years later once he started kind of going down the line of YouTube. And then I'm like, oh, I know this guy. And we kind of rekindled, and then we started shooting stuff together. And that was kind of during his come up era. So yeah. And that is a really valuable connection in my life and in my career, both as friendships and as somebody who's really advanced so many opportunities in my life.
Yeah. Well, at what point do you think you realized that this was now your job? I feel like there was a weird thing with me where I was doing YouTube on the side for so long that I enjoyed it so much that it wasn't really a job. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like I'm running 3 channels, I'm doing podcasts. And I was like, okay, I've now got revenue streams. This is now a job. Yeah. At what point did that flip happen?
For me, there's like 2 stories that we can go down. The one that is more meaningful for me is that, I grew up watching Ben Brown and Casey Neistat, and so I had always really aspired to do something similar to what they were doing. And I started filming after watching one of Ben's videos, his like Canada Visual Vibes video. I was just so jazzed to start filming my own travel content and travel videos because this is ultimately what I wanted to do with my life. And so you can only get to those places in your career by actually doing it or having a portfolio or investing back in yourself, whether that's sweat equity and or gear or time or, on trips in my case. So, at that point I was still living at home. My parents and I were doing kind of one of our big last trips where we went to Arizona. I filmed that trip. I leveraged that to try to get like a share from the Tourism Board of Arizona on Twitter. And so I took that, share on Twitter and then use it as a case study to then get the Tourism Board of Ireland on my next trip to support me. And then I got a free beer at the Guinness factory because of it. And oddly enough, that free beer was like such a massive confidence boost to be like, what I do has value. And then from there, I leveraged that Ireland trip into filming a video about Toronto, which then went viral by getting Huffington Post to share it, which like HuffPo, what happened to that? But now that was like a big part of my life. And then that turned into getting an entire trip sponsored by the Tourism Board of the Azores. And I remember sitting at the end of that trip, we were in this one area called Setsi Dash, which is basically this volcano that overlooks these 2 lakes that come together. One's green and one's blue, and in the center they kind of like mix together. And there was an abandoned 5-star hotel, and I was sitting on the edge of that abandoned 5-star hotel overlooking sunset, being like, this is my life and this is going to happen because I have enough data points to prove that this is going to be my life moving forward if I continue on this trajectory. And so that was one moment that I knew that things were going to happen. And then another key moment was when I was about 9 months into, doing the YouTube thing, and I landed like a $2,000 like brand deal where it was like one YouTube video and I shot it in like a day, and then I finished it 24 hours after that and posted it. So I was like, in 3 days I made $2,000 US. Like, this is crazy. And then from there, it just, once you're like, I could live off of that one brand deal that month if I really needed to, I think that's a turning point. And then from there, it's just been what my life has been for the last 5 years now.
I think it's a lot more respected as well, YouTube and creative careers now. I think that, and potentially there still is a bit of a stigma around it, but back in the day, they seemed to be so much of a stigma where it was like, oh, you're a YouTuber? Oh, like who cares?
Yeah.
And people didn't see it as a job. Do you think that's kind of changing?
Oh, it's 100% changed. I went from having to, and it's hard to say if this is like a growth stage in my life, but I felt like I went from having to try to convince people that what I was doing for a living was like a valuable decision in life. Luckily, my parents were always very supportive, and that comes from a place of, they've always are just like, whatever you want to do, we're 100% behind you. But for anybody, like I distinctly remember one story of being in an elevator and someone was like, what do you do for a living? And then I was like, YouTube. And then they literally were like, how do you make money at that? Can you even do that for a living? And me trying, like literally just saying like, and this is, I don't have a ton of respect for my answer. I would never answer it this way, but I had so much like pride in my work to the point where I just said what I made last year from it as the door was closing and the person's like mouth was jaw dropped from it. and I remember being like, well, I don't need to defend this job anymore. And the nice thing now is that people understand it. They're like, so much so that it's either they think there's no middle ground. What I think is really interesting, it's either you make no money or you're like a multi-millionaire, super successful person. And so, which is always interesting because no one talks about this middle area, like the middle class of social media, where there's just people who make a very comfortable living now through the platform. It's either it seems to be, oh, you're Logan Paul or you're like nobody. I don't know why people still think this way. And there's so much curiosity about how you make money online that people just drill you with questions because they think it's such an interesting career choice. So I've gotten to the point now that I actually would prefer people don't know I'm a YouTuber. And it's not because I don't have interest in talking to them or educating them. It's that through my experiences, it's such an invasive set of questions that nobody else would. Like if someone was like, I'm a doctor, you'd just be like, okay, cool. Like, but for whatever reason now it's like, if you're a YouTuber, I think everybody aspires to want to do that now, especially kids. It was like the number one picked job. And so I find that people will just go to town. How does it work? How much money do you make? And just questions that nobody else would ever get grilled in any other job. I don't understand. So yeah, that's a very, very long response. A funny thing that you'll hear from me is I'll go, I'm the person that's like, long story short, but gives you like the 3-part trilogy series and the BTS behind the scenes of like every question that you'll ask me. So I'll try my best to like reel it back in at the end of the day. But the stigma's gone.
No, you're the same as me. Don't worry. I've got this thing. My girlfriend was saying it the other day. So I've got ADHD. So I think that I can just go off in like separate tangents one after the other, and they're totally different sides of the, you know what I mean? It's just, there's no relevance to them at all.
Like 6 engines running and you can like be solving like an equation. You're like, all right, the pizza tip should be this much. And then the other like side of it's like, you know what would be a great idea for a piece of content? You know who we should reach out to?
Do you think, you're right though. Like, see if you were a doctor or an accountant, if someone went up to you and was like, what's your salary? You'd be like, fuck off. I'm not telling you that. Yeah. But for some reason, as like a YouTuber, it's very like, it's almost like normalized to just kind of have that. I feel like maybe it's because people think that they know you through watching your videos.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just my experiences with certain people, but everyone just seems to want to know the secret sauce. And then it's hard when they just hear it's like, well, you got to just take massive risk and put in time and be consistent. And there's no promise of success. And then I just don't think they want to be like, well, how did you do it so I can also do it? Yeah. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work that way. I can't give you the recipe to be able to do this for yourself.
Yeah, well, you need to work it out yourself. And I think what people forget is that they might see one of your videos, But from that video, you've put in 2, 3, 4 years of work to get to that place.
Yeah.
And people want to skip that queue and just get right to the top. It's impossible. You need to figure things out yourself. You need to make those mistakes in order to kind of like further your career. And
yeah, and I also think it's important to make mistakes when no one's watching. I think it would suck even more to have a whole bunch of eyeballs on you and then you haven't gone through the reps yet, and then people either like lose respect or drop off, and then it would be even harder to win them back versus just when things were in the shadows and you were just doing your thing and learning, okay, this works or this doesn't work. I think that's better and easier and more sustainable than having like giant jumps in success and skyrocketing. Plus, there's a sense of pride. You know, I was just talking about this with somebody yesterday where I'm really like proud of the grind period in my life right now. Like, and what I did, not right now, but what I did being in the trenches for so long, that I'm really happy that I just stuck it out and made as many mistakes as I did so that I can be in this place now and feel like I earned it too. I think that's a really, really big thing. Like I can look back and be like, I tried to do the music thing. I tried to do this. I tried to make this work. I did the videos. I started the company. Like, and that took like a decade before anything else really like took off. Right.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, so I was doing some research and I was looking through your old videos, and the music is what I stumbled across with the long hair and the kind of the videography aspect. So did you enjoyed primarily more the music side of things, and then as a subsequent to that, you went into the videography, or was the other way around?
Yeah, I think it was just a nature of trying to make it as a musician. You know, when you don't have all of the resources to be able to afford getting music videos made, and I grew up in the social media area where I would watch people like Tyler Ward. He would record his own songs and then film them and then put up videos online. Like I got my chops both up in music and video because I just needed to do marketing for my music career. And through that, I learned that I really loved video and I loved photography. And I mean, that's really where like my career had started, was in photography. And then at that point it went into music because of the nature of music being very popular during my teens and punk rock music and bands. And so I started a lot of these bands growing up. And I can look back now and really realize that I think a lot of the reason why I started music just came from a place of just wanting, you know, attention, because I don't think I loved myself a lot at the time. And so I think I thought music would be my way of getting attention from people, because, you know, I didn't know how to get it in any other way. And that had worked in the past. But for me, the skill set of video came from the necessity to market my music.
Yeah, and what would I've been struggling with this one a little bit, and I'm just wondering, it'd be interesting to hear your answer. What would you define yourself as if somebody asked?
I have so many different answers depending on like my mood of the day. It's not that it comes from like any place of sass. It's just sometimes it's nice to just be like under the radar. So, you know, if people ask you, just be like, I work in media. If a border person asks, I'm always like, I'm an editor. And then like, of what? And like video content for education and media. And they're like, okay, sure. And then like just stamp your passport. Because if you say YouTuber, I was crossing the Mexican border for a job recently, and the guy was like looking at all my camera gear. He's like, are you a YouTuber? I was like, no. I just like making videos. He's like, okay, because we don't want any YouTubers coming into Mexico, right? I was like, yeah. They're the worst. So, you know, time and place. But I think if the average person was to ask, I think I'd just say, you know, if I felt in a comfortable area, I'd just say I'm a YouTuber, or I would say I'm a content creator online.
Yeah. I see. I think I feel personally that there's maybe still like a slight stigma behind it. So I normally say I'm a videographer. I feel like there's perhaps this is just me maybe thinking on it too much, but there's maybe a respect thing when you say you're a YouTuber, that people don't respect you as much as they would if they thought it was a bigger career. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I could throw some questions at you because I think this is something that I've dived into in the last little while. Do you have shame around being a YouTuber?
It's a great question. I don't think I do. I think I did. I think that my parents, and although very, very supportive, they didn't understand it. And my parents are very quite like analytical, so they were pushing more to the kind of like analytical finance side. And when I got into photography and video, they were like, quite rightly, because they didn't grow up in this era, the social media era. They didn't understand it. So perhaps when I was younger, there was more shame in it. But I think now, with the recognition from my parents that what I'm doing is making money, in essence, there's less shame in it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, we could also, like, this could just be like such an interesting conversation around one's feeling, because it also stems into caring about what other people think. So do you feel like if you say I'm a YouTuber and someone doesn't really understand it, do you feel the need to try to like justify it, or could you just confidently be like, cool, yeah, that's what I do. What do you do? And like, and not feel attacked or feel like you are worthy or less worthy because this is the career choice? Because ultimately, the conversation that we're having right now, I get the sense that you feel very confident about your career, but does it bother you if other people don't understand it? And do you feel like you need to defend it?
I think that's a really great question. I think that I feel like I need to defend it when people think that I feel like people, for some reason or another, and this might be a generalization, but they put you down for being a certain, like a YouTuber or an Instagram person or a photographer, a videographer. They don't see it as a real job. And that really annoys me because, for example, with you might upload a video that's 5 to 10 minutes, but I know that video took 2 weeks to film, 2 weeks to edit. You've probably spent 4 hours just looking for the music for the video. So that, I suppose I get defensive because I know how much work creators put in and the value that other people put on that.
Do you think it makes you more or less valuable to that person if you didn't have success? Like if you were just the person who had the skill set as a YouTuber? And I'm not trying to like... create an area for you to try to defend. I'm asking questions because this is something I went through a lot over the last couple of years. And I came from a very like a world where I cared so much about what people thought of me that even if like YouTube videos didn't do well, I would like delete them because I thought the optics of like what I was protecting was like super, super important, and that my career was like less or more valuable based on my success. And then that comes from data points where, like I just really recently lost out on like a 6-figure job because they like came back and they were like, actually your views are down. So we just don't think this is a good investment. And then that can kind of get back to you and start to like trigger anxiety. But at the end of the day, I also know that there will be people who see value in me and will see value in what I'm doing, and that my career is not based off of my just last performance, but for the entire scope of my portfolio. And so, I've really tried to work so much through, and it's still an ongoing thing that I constantly have to pay attention to. But, if people ask, maybe in the way that they ask it, there might be the times where I'll get triggered and then want to try to defend the job, but it's not my responsibility to try to make that other person more comfortable, because if you're projecting that they think that the career is, of less value, or that you are not being treated, that it's like, oh, he makes videos on the internet, haha, that's so crazy. Like they think of it, but it's probably deep down, they also want the same thing. And so I've just gotten to a place where I just don't care about making the other person comfortable anymore, and that this is my life, and I'm very happy with my life in terms of the choices that I've made to be here. And that can come from a place of privilege because I do have success. And that can also come from a place of privilege because of the opportunities I've been afforded and the level of jobs and income that comes in from it. But at the end of the day, I've really worked so hard to just be like, I love what I do. I don't need even my parents to tell me that it's great, even though sometimes I do. Like every now and then there was a big part in my life where I would like send screenshots of my bank account to like my parents, and then just to be like, see, it's a good job. Right. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things and that still happens from time to time, because ultimately, I think we're just looking for validation from the people that we love, that what we're doing for our lives, but it really, you have to look so internally and be like, no, I chose this because I enjoy this. Hopefully you picked it because you enjoy it, right?
Yeah, I think I love it, but you're absolutely right in what you said in terms of the metrics. You know, you can't be held accountable for just your last video's performance because you've put in, you know, your YouTube channel's been going for 11 years. I mean, you've got 11 years experience in storytelling, in videography and photography. Adrian Barker, I'm not sure do you know Adrian Barker?
No, I'm not familiar.
He's a watch guy. You should watch his videos. He's a good friend of mine. He's really incredible. And I had a deal from, I'm not afraid to say the company, the North Face contacted me. They wanted to buy drone footage off of me because I had a North Face jacket. I just so happened to have a North Face jacket on. And they were offering like 60 quid for the drone footage. And I spoke to Adrian and was like, I partially want it to be featured, but also that's kind of a slap in the face.
Yeah.
And Adrian was like,
admin time to even send the invoice is like 60 quid.
Yeah, exactly. So Adrian was like, it's not, you need to understand, Harrison, because I was quite young at the time. He was like, you got up at 3 a.m. to climb a mountain in Scotland. You've also bought your drone. You've also had 4 years experience on your drone. You've also color graded that footage, etc., etc., etc. They're not just paying for the drone shot, they're paying everything that went before the drone shot.
Yeah.
So he was like, absolutely not. You should be quoting well ahead of that. And I think a lesson for videographers, especially aspiring videographers, is like, know the value of your work because it's so much more valuable than you might think it is.
Yeah, I think when you start to realize that the time that you're spent even just having like the email conversation is all time that could be billed, because and I think the biggest thing that we do as creatives, we always just give our ideas up front. And now we're at a point where like we won't give you a creative idea unless it's like something that we're trying to build a relationship on, but the contract has to be signed. Like I have 10 years experience, trust that the video is going to be good because here's like 100 or 500 versions of great content that has come out of here. And you don't need to feel confident that the idea has to be good in order to be paid, which some agencies still do that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, we're trying to get to a place in our business and this YouTube channel where we don't give the creative until that contract's signed.
That's a great way to do it, because, and this is a question that I literally had in my book as well. I've encountered the issue where brands can be very restrictive on your creative output. So they can dictate parts of your video and make it very wooden and just not good. Have you had that? Have you experienced that?
Yeah. And I mean, it's still something that I work through a lot these days, is that I'm trying not to constantly like people please and brand please in the sense of it is always better to serve the audience and not the brand. And ultimately, you want to make both parties happy, but the one that matters the most is the person that's consuming the content at the end of the day and how it represents your brand. And so for me, it's constantly like you have to like walk the fine line of, here's the brand. It has some KPIs that it needs to talk about, but it's probably in the best interest of that brand to just trust you to do your thing. Rather than trying to jam pack like 90 messages into one video. Just be like, just focus on 2. Let me do those. Maybe spread those out against a bunch of other creators, and just trust that what I've done from the past, and really it's about communicating confidence to the brands at the end of the day that you will be able to deliver without them trying to stronghold your creativity.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I think that you know your audience better than they do. And for them to dictate, parts of the video, like there's been brands that contact me and it's like a good figure. It's like a nice figure. And I'll just be like, you will not be happy with the end result because of the restraints you're putting on me. So I'd rather just not do it. And that's the way to angle it, is that if you know that firstly, it's sort of disrupting your creative flow, but also that it just won't do as well, that will be made an example of because it's your last work and you're always compared to what you just did. So always try and make the right decision. Finances are nice, but your work needs to maintain that good trajectory.
Yeah, and your integrity, because once you lose somebody because of making something that, you know, maybe they felt overly sold to, or that you seem like a sellout, or that, you know, it wasn't the best of your ability because of the constraints that were put on the project, ultimately you're going to have to make like 5 to 10 pieces of content to try to win those people back. What's the saying? It's like, you know, it takes one bad thing to lose somebody, and then you have to do like 20 things to regain their trust again. And that's the reality of the situation. The same goes for online. You know, if you convince somebody that, you know, you're willing to compromise on something, that serves you in the worst way, it serves the brand in the worst way. And the funny thing is, one of the things I wanted to touch base on when we were just chatting about this is that most of the people that are reaching out to you who are representing that brand, whether it's an agency or the brand itself, you have to try to put yourself in the shoes of that person, because they're just trying to please their boss. And if their boss goes, oh, okay, the metrics are that this person said this line, this line, this line, and this line in the video. Good job, person who's representing the brand. Thanks for getting the creator to do that, versus just having a better metric being like, did we get brand awareness? Do people think that we're cooler now? Did we get sales from this? Maybe those are better metrics to be communicating to that brand person. But if you can empathize with that person, just scared to lose their job, and so they just want to do exactly what their boss is saying, you can start to really like get into the mind of that like other person, that they're just trying to protect their livelihood at the end of the day. And so you have to balance it of being like, hey, how do I communicate trust? How do I communicate that we will get there? And if they're not willing to budge on that, then don't compromise your integrity as a creator for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a valuable lesson, and something that I've definitely gone through. And I think, I mean, this comes later on in the career. I've been working on this for 8 years, but sometimes when you do go to the manager or the person that's on, perhaps, I don't want to say on top because that's not a nice way of putting it, but at the top of the pyramid in terms of the company structure, that's when you get the best projects, because essentially they'll give you budget and just be like, I trust you, make it good. And you don't want to let them down. So normally you do a good job, which is great. What do you think would be the best advice you could give to someone wanting to start on YouTube?
I think it's important to have some semblance of what makes you unique, because at the beginning, you'll probably like copy what other people are doing in your niche in order to understand how it works, and being afraid to show who your true self is through that platform. But the reality is that there is something that makes you unique and different. You have some sort of storyline that it sounds like I'm contradicting myself, because I'm like, you're not that special. And then I'm over here, I'm like, you're actually kind of special. But the reality is that you've been raised differently than most people. You have a perspective on life that's potentially different. And it goes back to one of my favorite movies, the one with Lady Gaga, where they're talking about like A Star is Born. And it's important to have something to say. And I think that is really huge, is that rather than just being the noise in a sea of other content, it's like, quality will rise to the top and personality will rise to the top, and your unique story and perspective and having something to share that is meaningful, that could relate to a lot of other people. I think just have some idea of like when that might come in your life, because there's that. And then the practical aspect is like treating YouTube like a job. If you treat it like a hobby, you'll only ever reap the benefits and the success of it being a hobby. Whereas if you think of it like it's a full-time job and you showed up every day, if you had the capacity to at least do like, even if it started as a side hustle where you put in the hours like 9 to 5 on a free Friday, or you did it on the weekends, treat it like you would a part-time job or a full-time job, and you are your boss. And it was interesting. I was talking about Mark Bohm about this. YouTube is your boss, and would your boss be mad if you didn't show up?
It's quite a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
And do you think, how have you dealt with the kind of, I think as an entrepreneur, it's sometimes hard to motivate yourself when there's not someone there waving their finger at you. How have you motivated yourself to kind of keep engaged with YouTube, with social media, with the ever-changing landscape, while working for yourself?
I think my perspective on staying motivated is that motivation comes and goes. I don't believe that there's going to be days that you're going to be like all in, and then other days you're like, I don't want to do anything. I think I really love the like stoicism, and stoicism is more about just like, this is your duty. Like, this is what you do. And I'm not going to be over here being like, I'm so stoic, I just show up. But it's so ingrained in my workflow that, and this is not a workaholic mindset. This is that if I took a day off during the week, that I know that I could have been working, like I do feel weird about it. There's a difference between being like, I'm resting and this is productive to be resting, versus showing up and being dutiful about it. In the sense of this is what I'm supposed to do. So I do it whether or not I feel like I want to do it that day or not. And I think this is the same advice you'd probably hear on like some sort of podcast relating to the gym. It's like, you still show up, you still put the reps in, even if you don't feel like you want to do it. But that it's the same thing. You're not going to advance your career unless you show up and put the work in. And in a lot of the ways that we've been raised is that if you were raised not in like an entrepreneurial mind, like home, or maybe you have something like deep down inside you that's like, I'm an entrepreneur, that's like a different mindset. But if you've been raised by family members that have jobs, and it's like, okay, you are rewarded by your job with finances by showing up. So you have this like perspective that I go in, and then people are always trying to like be like, oh, here's my life outside of my work. But if you just integrate your work into your life, then you'll find ways of just being like, I have to show up and I will reap the benefits and the rewards in the same way that I would if I had a normal job.
It kind of resonated what you said there about kind of when you take a day off during the week, you're kind of, it's not an anxiety, but it's kind of like a tension where you're like, oh, I could be moving forward.
Yeah.
Do you think that in your career you are driven, or do you think that you've been dragged by something from your past that you're perhaps running from?
I know that I was motivated in my career for a long time by a sense of proving myself. And that came from a place of not loving myself and a place of rejection. So, I had so many moments in my childhood of being like rejected for who I wanted to be, in combination with the rejection from important figures in my life. In that case being like, let's say in my, early teens, being rejected by women and having a pattern of this. And so when you feel rejected and then you don't know how to give your self love, then you're like, well, I need endless amounts of it. So you start to search for it in playing music live in front of a giant audience and being like, okay, cool. That put a Band-Aid on the situation for a little bit. Look, all these people are happy. They see value in me entertaining, right? So, okay, that's a huge one. Then you start to get onto social media and it becomes like an addiction. You're like, oh, look at all these people that love me. Look at all these numbers. And it wasn't until I realized that I didn't know how to just say like, I love myself, and that I think I'm good and I think I'm great and I have a value outside of what I do in my career, that it changed my motivation. I just had to like, it stopped being that I was feeding the beast of ego and sadness, and that I was now like in my life as of the last like year and a half, I just show up for my job because it's my duty to educate and inspire people to live their best lives. And thank God that was a byproduct of my own lack of self-love. Like, how interesting is that people still got inspired and motivated and wanted to achieve things by watching my content. So luckily, like, the core of that voice didn't really like need to change too much, but the place of motivation came from not loving myself because I had been rejected. And so it was me just trying to fill what was if you imagine like a bucket and it has a hole in the bottom. And so every time someone says like, I love you, maybe they put like a Band-Aid, but then it gets wet and it falls off and it keeps like dropping down. And so it's like, how do you fill that bucket back up? Well, I'm the only one that can fill that bucket back up and heal that hole in the bottom of it. And so that really just came from a place of being like, actually, you know what? I think I'm the shit, and I think I'm, and not in like an ego way, but in a way that's like, I love myself. And that's an ever-going practice that constantly needs attention through therapy and self-love practices. But that was not me running away, but trying to desperately not drown.
Yeah. It's the reason I'm asking, it's a battle that I've been kind of facing recently, is that I feel like when I was younger, especially when I was like starting in the career, I was doing it for the same reason you were, that I was rejected when I was younger. Nobody really understood what I did. Nobody really put value on what I did. So I had this huge chip in my shoulder that I needed to be a valuable person and I needed to work to get there. Yeah. And I think over the last kind of year, I've realized that I was pushing myself way too far. Like I was traveling all around the world. I was up at 3 a.m. every morning to catch the sunrise. I was literally falling asleep at the wheels of my car because I was trying to further my career. And I was like, oh shit, this needs to stop. And I think a lot of creators and videographers kind of go through that they're trying to maybe run from something, or
prove something too. You know, for a lot of people, it comes from a place, and like, you know, even I can say confidently, I came from a family that was very supportive, but I also know that they didn't understand that I wanted to be a creative, and that even if they valued creativity, they still wanted me to have like a safe job. You know, my mom would be like, oh, you should go to school for like to this program, or like you should be an architect, because in their mind, this is such a normalized career. And I don't have like, you know, if my parents listen to this, this is not me being upset at them for having this. This is them just being like, we want you to be safe, and we want you to be okay. And we want you to be able to navigate in this world without having too much struggle and stress, and feel, you know, somewhat. So they're just hedging their bets, right? Plus, they didn't have access to tools of therapy and have access to tools of being able to understand how a person of authority's opinion of you can dictate so much of your life and your self-worth and your value. So, you know, to both of them, this is not shade. I love them both. They're incredible parents. They were just trying to protect me. But what that created for me through a couple of traumatic experiences in my childhood, which one of them was like a series of 4 deaths in our family. And so you have this perspective that like life is short. You never know what can happen, especially those deaths being like sudden. And then having, you know, the safe route consistently kind of pushed on you, and not really understanding. Like I remember distinctly having to defend wanting to be a videographer in my life, and my parents being like, well, how much should they make? And then literally being like, well, you like the David Letterman show. And like, I'll deliver it in the way that I did as a kid, which comes from a place of like, just try to understand me. And it literally was like, well, you watch the David Letterman show. There's like 4 videographers with the camera people in the back filming. Here, wait, Google. Okay, how much do the videographers on David Letterman make a year? $140,000 USD a year. Look at, right? And it's not. It's constantly trying to prove yourself, when really you could just be like, I meet people who don't give a shit about what people think of them, and they're like, whatever, I just do my own thing. And like, what a beautiful place to be in. Like, I've had to unlearn this so much throughout my entire life because I cared so much about what people thought of me, especially your parents and family members, to the point now that it's like, ironically, it's like, you could argue to say I'm the most like financially successful person in my family. And like, and then now I'm here and I'm like, why did I do all that? And like, did I need to get here as fast as I did? What was I trying to prove? Right. Yeah. And it's not that in my case, my parents have always loved me, but I think I was always trying to prove that my career choice and who I am as a person is of value to the world. And what is, and then maybe I never defined the number that I needed to show them, and or myself to be like, here, look, see, like it's cool, right? Yeah. And then it's a really interesting place to be in now, where I'm actually trying to redefine what my next goals in life are, because I love where I'm at and I can continue on this path, but I think what I value more is inner clarity on who I am and what I desire out of life, because I am grateful to be in a privileged position that my financial worries are not as concerning to me, but in a place of being like, what parts of my personality are destructive?
Yeah, yeah. And do you think this is? I'm not trying to be sort of dig here, but this is partially just because I'm thinking about the same thing. Do you think therapy helped on that road to kind of recovery in terms of self-love?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I even went to like a by accident, I got invited by Chelsea Kawhi to like a self-love like weekend practice by a company here in Toronto that is called Othership. And they helped guide me through like a really, like that weekend is a very powerful weekend that I'll always remember, because we did a lot of exercises to learn to heal those aspects of yourself. And it's interesting because I used to listen to, when I came from a place of, I was just so involved in my career, and I would see people talk about this stuff online. I'd be like, oh man, it sounds so airy fairy. Like, I don't get it. And I think that was just me blocking off probably the work I needed to do a long time ago. And now I'm in a place that I think everyone is on their own journey. And there's things that will stop you from wanting to try to like heal what you probably know should change in your life. Because it will ping for you, and life will give you lessons that until you until you learn the lesson, they'll just keep challenging you with it.
Yeah.
But therapy was like a huge part of it, so much so that I'm wanting to kickstart it again. You know, I go through phases where it's like I do it for 3 months and then I'm kind of off of it for a bit, and now I'm in like another phase in my life where I'm like, I need to kickstart that again. There's things that are pinging big in my life that I need clarity on, and a lot of the time it's. I feel very fortunate that I have a lot of friends who are open to having discussions that act like a form of therapy, and that my YouTube channel acts like a form of therapy as well, as like releasing these videos, a creative therapy. And then I read a lot of books on this, and there's certain books that I like consistently reread over and over again that help provide a stability for whatever anxieties that might be coming up, and or help me deeply understand where these traumas and or experiences or things are stemming from, which is funny because a lot of the times when you read these books, your story is more common than you think.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, you were saying there that when you film videos as well, it's almost like a form of therapy to you. I think that's from YouTubers. That's like the third time I've heard that. There was a girl on the show, amazing ASMR artist called Josette Allen. And she was saying that when she does her videos, as well as her being there as a creator for the audience are also there for the creator. Yeah. So it's like this really nice thing where although they're getting value, they're also giving a lot of value because it's someone to talk to and it's someone to like soundboard off of. And also if you do have any stresses, you can kind of talk to them or talk through it. And then at least when you talk through it in your head, you're kind of dealing with the issue. I think for me, podcasts have been amazing because where I ask kind of more prying questions, people put them back to me, and it allows me to think and actually be like, oh, maybe I did work too hard when I was a bit younger. And it's a great medium for kind of talking to people just like yourself, where you're like, oh, well, I've had experience in that area and this is what you should do. And this is what helped me.
Yeah. And I think this is a much more common discussion that we're starting to see a lot less shame around. People are more and more interested in learning about the self at this stage in their life, because they know that you're probably the one that's getting in the way of like whatever you really want in life.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think that was kind of happening with you, that you were kind of getting in your own way a little bit?
I don't know if I've always gotten in my own way, but let me use like a key example of something that I know is happening right now in my life that I am aware of. And I'm like, literally like, I'm like, how is this still so difficult for me, even though I know it's exactly what I need to do? And it's probably, there's an answer there that I haven't fully like developed. So I know that I'm sitting on mounds of epic and amazing content. Like, dude, I'm talking like years of stuff that no one's ever effing seen that is friggin' dope. And for whatever reason, I only continue to keep filming and not posting it. and I convince myself that I don't have enough time, or if my editor works on it, it's just not good enough to post, or it's like it's not quite on trend. But what is it that, because I know I can sit here and be like, be consistent, do the thing. And then everyone's like, okay, dude, but like you're posting YouTube videos like every 2 weeks. I don't know what the cadence is. And like, when was the last time you posted to Instagram? And so am I like, and these are questions I'll ask myself on the podcast, and feel free to like dive in. Am I like worried about like what people think still, even though I'm like preaching that I don't care about what people think? Or do I worry that I'll continue to get more success? It will be overwhelmingly amount of opportunities that present themselves to me. And that because I'm a people pleaser, I don't know how to say no. And so that I'll just be so busy to the point that I don't even know if I enjoy my life. So that's like a really like, this is like me getting in my own way. So am I projecting that that's going to be the case? Or do I feel like I need to heal something in order before I can actually be consistent? And then I say I want to be consistent. And then, but my experience with it is that the consistency brings success. But now do I want more of that success, or do I desire like less of it?
Yeah, I think, do you think that, I think when you're starting a YouTube channel, you do certain things to appease the algorithm, right? Consistency, you have some clickbaity thumbnails, you're on trends, but once you have a certain amount of success, you can kind of tailor the content to suit you, and it's your passion projects. I suppose, do you think that content that you're sitting on means so much to you that you're scared of posting it on the channel just in case it doesn't do as well as you think?
It's not even about, I think one of the things I've definitely more or less outgrown to 80% is caring about the metrics. And I know from a business perspective, it's important to understand the metrics, but I have enough data points to be like, sometimes they do well, sometimes they don't do well. That's not like within my control. I think I've really learned about the boundaries of knowing what's in my control and what's not in my control. But the worry that I don't have a defined worry on it, because I don't know if I'm concerned about comments of things looking and feeling the same as somebody else, or that I think I struggle with discipline around the output and consistency. So I will say, I'll start my day and I'll be like, today you're going to post a reel. And then the day will go and I'll find myself like having multiple calls on emails and jumping on business things and having to manage the brand and the business more than the output of the creativity. And then I tell myself, and then I think I get sad that I'm not as involved in the creative anymore. And so, I will admit that I've taken steps to do that. You've been CC'd on emails with Matthew, who's my new hire right now, really, really good friend of mine that is now working full time. And he's helping to be a producer as well as a business manager, in the sense of he can, set up these calls, these times. And so that creates free space for me to be able to go and create stuff. But when you know that I still sometimes fill that free space with more BS of things that don't push my career forward. Right. And so when I can say, and I think I have to just truly believe, it's like, what will move the needle is putting out the content that you shot. And so maybe by the end of this podcast, we've come to a really good place of healing with that. But I struggle with that. And that's a great way to answer your question, that I can get in the way of my own success and my own desires in life.
Yeah. Do you think that you have an editor, right?
Yeah. Lucas used to work full-time. Now he's like part-time freelance. So, we kind of just do like project to project, but like I have so much work for him that he's constantly doing stuff. But I think that was just in a place of, long story short, just in a place of him having more autonomy over his life and us still having a working relationship.
Yeah, for sure. I think that something that I struggled with, especially when I was growing the team, we got an editor in, and I was still so hands-on with the edits that I didn't give him the freedom to like do his own creative thing, because it's really hard to let go of something you're so close to. Did you feel that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I still feel that. I think I still have elements of control issues there. And I think that was something that got in my way for a long time. And I had like a mentor when I first started my business, and he would always say, he's like, you got to let go, man. You can't just be involved on every single thing. You got to trust people to do their job. And I'd be like, okay. And then I get a bookkeeper and I'm still like going in and double checking her work. And it's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're paying this person like thousands of dollars, and then you're still wasting your time, which is valued at thousands of dollars. Like, what insecurities do you have? Like, just trust the person to do their own work. And this is bookkeeping. It's not even creative, right? And so like, then all of a sudden you're like, okay, I can let that go. Now I can let this go. Now I can let, but you still, you'll listen to podcasts with Casey Neistat where he's like, I think the voice gets lost in the edit. And I'll talk to Matt. He's like, I don't know. I think the voice gets lost in the edit. And then you're like, but then I'll talk to Peter and he's just like, nah, man, Kirk crushes it. He always hits my voice. And then it's just about education. And so you can have so many different viewpoints and mindsets on the creative process. And I think it's for you to define what you believe to be what works for you. And like, again, this comes back to, it's all personality stuff. Like, this is me getting in my own way, being like, I got to do the edit because that's, that little flare in the corner, that's the special sauce.
Or that seamless transition, that zoom transition.
No one else knows how to do that. It's like, you could probably find an editor in Bulgaria that could do it for you and just do it really cheaply and make it look amazing. But that's, you're just convincing yourself. So these are like real practices that I'm trying to develop. I'm using this year as my get over my bad habits year. And this is me kind of vocalizing that for the first time online. But I think that it started with hiring Matt. And being like, I need to take a step back from all of these business dealings and have someone else to help work on that with me. Like, I have my agent, Kristen, she's amazing, but I can't be involved on like producing every video, and then shooting it up. Like, and I'm also getting to a point now too, where I'd love to have like a part-time editor just come into the office. Cause I had to admit to myself being like, no, I still like working in a space with people, and that's cool. And I'll travel. I'll still send like proxy files, but it takes the joy out of it if it's not a collaborative process all the time.
And how did you begin that kind of journey of scaling your business? Because something that a lot of people struggle with at the start is that control aspect, and it's something that I definitely struggled with at the start. So how did you begin to scale your business?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be elements of leaps in faith. I think at some point you will get to a point in your business where you will either not enjoy an aspect of it and it needs to be done by somebody else for your own mental health, as well as just your time is better used somewhere else. Like, if you can define what you're good at, do more of that, and then offload the other stuff to other people. Like, learning how to delegate is a really hard thing. But and then I'm jumping the gun on answering this question too, is that you will also get to the point where you hire too many people and then your entire job is just about managing other people. And then you're like, oh, now I've lost like the core of what I even do here. So that's its own like next stage in the process that is inevitably going to come once you start to scale. But you have to, I always like the idea of crawl, walk, run. And so crawl with somebody. Like, if you need help with an editor, have them just do one project and then see how that goes, and like try to objectively look at it. Like, not be like, they didn't nail it first time. Like, know where. I think one of the things that I've always been really happy with is that I've known where I can see potential in someone, and it has more to do with their work ethic than it is with their skill set. And I think if you can see that in somebody, that's a great thing to test out with a walk. Then you can start to with a walk, then you move on to the walking stage where you're like, okay, let's start like a once a week edit, or let's get you in once every week and see how that goes. Okay, let's scale that up to like 2 or 3 times a week. And then at some point you can like, all right, let's dive in and let's get you like full time, and we'll scale that out, and we'll just see how we can hedge our bets over an entire year on this.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I think that I think attitude is irreplaceable. So if somebody has a bad attitude, even if they can do the job, sometimes, or most of the time in my experience, they're not right. Whereas if they have a good attitude, you can always teach them, train them, and over the years they'll kind of have more of your style and begin that editing process.
Yeah, it's also important to know who is a star and who is a team player. And I think having recognition of that at the beginning is really important, because there's people who, if you just use the analogy of like, there's the person who wants to be behind the camera, and then there's the person who wants to be on camera. And I think they're especially in this industry, there's always going to be the person that is reaching out, that has an ego, that is only doing it to learn everything that they can from you so that they can go and do it themselves. And I think being able to have some sort of foresight on that, because that's like a flash in the pan. Like you might get somebody who's like amazing and they're like, they crush it for like a year and then they dip and then they just steal all your clients. And then like, so that's like a whole other reality too. Right. And so I think it's important to really have good people skills if you're trying to scale your business, because you can automate a lot with AI, but you're inevitably going to still have to interact with people in a creative space. Like, it's not like we can just sit and, because at some point, if it's robots making videos for more robots, then like, what the hell are we at now, right? But if you're going to have to work with humans, because everybody's business is so nuanced, and it can come down even to like the place that you do business. Like the way that you do your taxes in Bali and Dubai are very different than the way you do taxes in the UK and or Canada. And so that's one element of your business that will require strategy and mindset and the specialized skill set. And now you're starting to get into other areas of creativity and scalability and email marketing and developing products. And like, you know, this is an endless job. It just requires so much like attention to different aspects, and then knowing if you really want to like pursue those or not. And just to get back to your question, is like crawl, walk, run is like the best way to scale your business. Just don't, like, people will be like, go all in. I think that is not going to work out all the time.
Yeah, and it puts you in a dangerous position as well, especially when you put everything into like equipment. Equipment's so expensive nowadays that I've seen people literally bankrupt themselves just by buying like two cameras, 4 lenses. You don't need that. Just buy a GoPro to start, and then kind of scale your way up. That's exactly what I did. What do you think is going to happen with AI in terms of like the editing process, in terms of, I suppose AI can't film stuff, but potentially it could in a while? What is your kind of thoughts on AI?
I think AI is great. I think there will be purists out there that will hear what I said and be like, nah, man, you're losing like what's important. I think AI is just another tool in the toolkit. And in the same way that probably people freaked out at typewriters existing when everyone was writing with pencils and being like, nah, this is crazy. We're never going to lose the heart of the pencil. It's like, technology creates more opportunity for artistic endeavors. Like, how cool is it that there will be people out there that will be AI artists? Like, I have one friend, I think his name is Justin McKenzie, based out of Utah. And like, I'm pretty sure, I hope that's him. But anyways, he's like going all in on being someone who just knows how to give prompts to the AI software in order to make beautiful art. And I see this stuff and I'm like, this is so dope. And so what difference does it mean if it speeds up the process of what the vision for something is? Because I think ultimately, you still require prompts and vision in order to get an output. And so the reality is that the visionaries are going to be the ones that win, the ones that have something to say, the ones that know what to develop, because you can't go into AI and be like, do my career. You know what I mean? And then like, it needs to be like, well, what? And what do you need me to say? Yeah. Because all it's doing, like I was talking about this with somebody yesterday, where it's like, if painting and in the paint stroke, and you have to go through every single paint stroke in order to get it. But if you just told AI, in the bottom left corner, I need 100 paint strokes that have this type of oil, type of texture, and make sure that it's like clumped in this area and make it look like this. All you're doing is speeding up the workflow, but you can't know to have vision unless you're like, you have to put those prompts in at the end of the day. And so that's an example. That's a story of what I think about AI. I think AI is going to do a lot for parts of my business that I hate doing, that are going to be better than I could ever have done it, because it's going to take the mass brain of lots of people who are already specialized. But at the end of the day, I can't communicate to an audience or relate to, like, people are going to still want to relate to me. and they're going to want to relate to my insecurities and the humanness of who I am. But I can maybe write a script that would give me a starting point to writing about my insecurities based on a lot of other people's.
Yeah. We found it really useful in terms of like SEO optimization and descriptions, and see like the mundane things that are just kind of, they're necessary, but they're repetitive, and they're just AI can do that, and it probably does it better than you. And I think it's brilliant. But then also you need someone to check it, because it can potentially be a bit airy fairy at points. So there's just so much scope for opportunity with it. I think I don't see it as a bad thing.
No, I think it's great. I think if I could input all of my video edits and then the software does like a rough cut for me, and then I can just go in and start to tweak it to my liking, I'd like, how awesome would that be? It'd probably make editing more enjoyable for me.
Yeah. Do you struggle with editing now?
I struggle with video editing. I love photo editing. And I struggle with video editing because it took me a long time to realize and admit that I had ADHD. So it would be really hard for me to sit down and like focus on something. But now I'm on medication that's helped drastically with my ability to focus. And again, I struggle more with the internal battle of like wanting to edit, because it comes down to like the consistency thing. It's like, I have issues with setting boundaries because I feel like I have to put out other people's fires. Whereas like if I just said Friday morning from 9 to 12, I show up and I do my job and no one bug me, then I probably output more, right? But what happens is you get an email that's like, hey, so, we're experiencing some issues with like the accounting software. Can you relink your Amex credit card back into it so that we can like do it? And you're like, yeah, sure. So
Yeah. And then your brain's been totally taken off of it. I'm the same. It's like, I literally lock myself in the studio in this room by myself if I need to do an edit. And and what I do with my phone now, and this is a really good tip for anyone that struggles with editing or just ADHD in general, put your phone on a time-lapsing yourself. And because you know that somebody's watching you, I mean, you're not going to post the video anywhere, but because you know that you are being watched and you need to do that job, you end up getting it done a lot faster. And I think that seriously helped me, because what I would do is I'd sit down to edit and then I'd be like, oh, but I've got some Iceland footage over there, but that watch is pretty cool. And then all of a sudden you've done nothing. You've done like 1/4 of 8 projects instead of just doing the one project.
Yourself that you've been inspired to write something in the future, and it, like, you just gaslight yourself into being like you're shit at your job.
What do you think of like the ever-changing landscape of social media? I know that Instagram's had a huge shift in terms of going towards video content, reels. My kind of take on it is that in a way, some of what it's doing is killing creativity, because it's kind of just hopping on trends that somebody else has created. Does that make sense?
Do you think that Instagram is hopping on trends, or do you think that people hop on trends? Because this is a huge discussion that I've brought up in many videos in the past.
So I think that Instagram rewards trends because it rewards like trending audio, or it rewards certain behaviors, is what I found.
What is the reward?
I think the reward is views. The reward is that a trending audio will give you more views than a non-trending audio.
What do you define as success on the platform? I'm curious for you. You don't have to tell me what you think it is for everybody. I'm just curious what you define as success on the platform.
I used to find success in the platform is, or the way that I used to define it was growing fast and hopping on these things fast so that I could grow and get more clients. I then got to a stage where I didn't really need to do that anymore. So my definition of success now is just being internally happy with what I post and how it looks on my feed instead of what other people think. Whereas, and I think that comes back to the question I asked you earlier in terms of I maybe was so invested in what I thought people thought of me that I wasn't focusing on myself. I was focusing on pleasing other people. Whereas now I'm like, no, this is my art. I'm going to create what I want to create.
Yep.
And did you feel
everything will always be the artistry versus the success of the business. I think there's always like a push and pull between the two voices of like, if you look at the angel and the devil on the shoulders, there's always going to be that. Yeah. I define success on the platform is really like, for me, it's two areas. One is, am I authentically showing up as who I am as a person, or am I putting on some sort of like face based off of like the parameters of the social media app? Like I think when I film YouTube videos, I feel really like myself, but somehow when I make like Instagram reels and I have to like almost keep it short to like it's funny, like I'll like censor and edit myself to the point where it's not that I don't recognize that person, it just feels very like stiff because it feels like it has to be this way. But I think the app, when this is really just as of yesterday from my own experiences, is starting to like reward personality. And so I want to define moving forward as can I show up with my personality, and is that personality gaining me followers? And because the followers ultimately are people who are choosing to be like, I want to see more of who you are and what your content is. So I'm almost interested in experimenting with like little vlogs versus trying to do what the app is defining me to do. And I think this is really just a giant way to potentially answer like something that I've been exploring recently is like, how do I tell and share my authentic voice on the platform? Not one that's been dictated by the success, not one that's been dictated by what I think I should be doing. It's like, can I just be me on this app and it still be well received?
Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with as well, because they're trying to appease that algorithm, but in reality, it should be your authentic self.
Yeah. I mean, I've stopped to care like so much about the views.
Yeah.
I think it's just more interesting if I post stuff and then I'm starting to see like followers go down. And man, I can look at it in a good way too, where it's like, okay, if I liked that and I'm losing followers from it, it's just constantly like refining the people I actually care to see my content now, because we're ever changing. Like who was on this app 4 years ago is very different than the person who is on it. So like, I don't need to continue to keep that image up, and maybe I'll get more followers from it. Maybe I'll get less, but maybe that will be like a more authentic group of people that care about who I am and what I'm doing on this platform.
Yeah. And do you think that's an interesting one? Do you think people build their own prison on YouTube because of the niche they go into? Because YouTube kind of rewards the algorithm, or rewards you with the algorithm if you post within a certain niche. For example, mine would be watches. Yeah. Whereas if you try and steer away from that because maybe you're getting older and you have other passions, it doesn't reward you as much.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it needs information to be like, okay, this is what they're doing. Sorry, and that's a long answer because I was thinking about something else here. The other interesting thing about like algorithms these days, from my understanding of it, is that it will feed content that let's say your video is about watches, but you don't normally make watch content. Most likely it will feed a bit to your audience, but then it will probably go to people who are interested in watch content, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's going to test a bunch of metrics on it. And it will probably be like, okay, if people are into watches, let's send this to people who are watches so that people stay on the app longer, so that they buy more on this app. So if the end of the day is like the goal of the app is just to keep people's attention spans, because that's the biggest currency, then ultimately just make good content about whatever you're interested in. It will probably land in the right eyeballs, because that's what the apps are designed to do these days. So algorithms are less about the following that you always had. Like you have some level of guaranteed of success, but the reality is that your content will probably just go to people who are interested in said subject matter.
Yeah. And I also feel that followers and views aren't indicative of success, because one of those viewers, say you only get 1,000 views, one of those viewers could potentially hire you, or, you know, it doesn't need to be a huge volume of views. And I think people get so caught up in the I only got 100 views. One of those viewers could be the CEO of a big company.
Yeah. Or the person that buys X product from you, or whatnot. I think the circles of the people that you surround yourself with are really, really interesting when it comes to like algorithms online. And a really like fun real life example of this is that I remember being at a Mercedes event and I was talking to one guy, and I was like, oh, what do you do? And he's like, I write for this automotive magazine. I was like, oh, how many readers do you have? He's like, 500. I was like, oh, that's crazy. He's like, yeah, but they're all Chinese billionaires. And then so it's like, so Mercedes is like, yeah, come out to the event and come do exposure on this. We want to be in that circle of people.
Yeah. Am I right in saying that you worked for Visit Scotland?
Yeah, like a long time ago. Yeah.
So you came over here. What did you think?
Yeah, man. Yeah, I loved it. I would love to come back. It's been a long time, and so if that's ever something that's on your radar, I would love to set up a couple of days of just going and exploring, man, because that would be amazing.
Mate, yeah, absolutely. There's like the Isle of Skye, there's Glencoe, there's like, I'm not sure if you went there before, but
I went to
there's
Tyree.
so many. Tyree's cool. Tyree's really nice.
Tyree was amazing. And then Oban, I feel like I'm saying it, Oban or Oban? Oban. Yeah. So we went there.
That's the Scottish accent.
Yes. And then we spent some time in Glasgow. And so I'd really like to go and explore more of Scotland. It's huge on my list.
Mate, it's beautiful. See, especially up in like Glencoe, Isle of Skye. Like,
dude, tell me, I'll come. Like, I literally would come in like, maybe this fall if that's good timing.
Yeah, for sure. We'll link up after and keep in touch, because honestly, it'd be so cool to film with you. I think when I was first starting in video and photography, there was 3 people that were my kind of like inspirations. One was Peter McKinnon, the GOAT, as always. One was Sam Calder, and the other was you, which is really nice. It's come full circle from kind of like where I started. I was always like, I'll never be able to talk to these guys or get to that level. And now we're having a conversation. It's quite nice, isn't it?
Oh, man, that's sweet. Well, I appreciate it. I'm glad that whatever I was doing at the time resonated.
It did. We have a closing tradition on the podcast. And I suppose for you, it would be, what is the most valuable lesson you've learned, I suppose, on YouTube, but in your career as a whole, because you're not just a YouTuber?
I'll just create some space as I think about this for a second. But I think the greatest lesson that I learned through all of this is something that we touched on in the middle part of this, is that I had very deep wounds that my career highlighted. So my insecurities about wanting to people please, feel loved by an audience, were really learned through this career. And that still I struggle with, wanting to mask parts of my personality in order to be accepted, because I still have fear of showing who I truly am. And that's a hard exercise to consistently be presented with. But at the same time, it means I'm constantly working on it, because I'm in this career choice and I love, and I'm so grateful that I'm in it. But the old insecure version of me built the success that exists here now. And the greatest lesson that I got from it, not from financial, not from anything else, was that I actually learned how to love myself through it. And if this is something that you're at all thinking about doing in your life, I think it will be the greatest adventure to put yourself out into the world and overcome whatever insecurities that you have, because the byproducts of all of it will probably be the greatest adventure of your life.
Very well put. Very well spoken. Very well done, man. Well, listen, I really appreciate your time, man, and thank you so much for coming on. And I know that you're still slightly ill, the same as me, from Yemen, so I appreciate it even more.
Yeah, no, it's all good, man. It's I think it's just my body telling me to slow down a little bit, but also just the nature of the landscape right now. Everyone seems to be sick. So I'm going to go blow my nose, because we've been chatting for an hour and 32 minutes and I can hear myself sounding stuffed up. So I'm going to go crush some medicine and then try to crush and edit and get something out before end of day, which would feel really rewarding.
I appreciate it, Chris. Well, thank you so much, buddy. And we'll be in contact.